30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds.
Hi,
My name's JC McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Good morning again. This is Jonathan Small, host and producer of All About You. And All About You is one of two different programs that I have the pleasure of hosting and producing live every single week at AccessTV.org's studio. All About You is a show that's designed to give you, the viewers, some background information about a particular guest's life story. And this morning, we have a very successful entertainer in the music industry who was part of a very successful, popular disco, R&B, funk, pop, whatever. Well, I ain't gonna say whatever, but a lot of different categories that was really popular during its heyday. The guest this morning on All About You is no other than an original member of KC and the Sunshine Band. He was also the percussionist drummer, no other than Oliver C. Brown. Good morning, Oliver. How are you doing?
Wonderful. Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to wake up on this election day and hope for the best for
Right, right.
the USA.
Okay. And you're looking very young, man. I mean, you keeping yourself up very well. You know what I'm saying? So taking care of
Well,
yourself.
you don't get old in music. It keeps you alive and keeps you healthy.
That's good to know. Oliver, you were born and raised in Berkeley, California.
Correct.
What was it like growing up as a child, teenager in that particular part of the country during that particular era?
Well, I think, Berkeley it was an amazing place to grow up in because it has that college up there, the University of California, which influences the entire city and the way people think of there.
Hmm.
And they are open-minded. They are very friendly, and racism and those kind of things almost seem kind of just buried up in Berkeley. So it's a great place to grow up.
Is Berkeley in any close proximity to Los Angeles, or is it kind of a good distance
No,
away?
Berkeley's like San Francisco's right across the bay.
Hmm.
It's in Northern California, and
Hmm.
Los Angeles is down south. But it's Oakland, Richmond, and San Francisco. But the reality is Berkeley is unique even amongst those cities. Like I said, when I grew up there, I thought the American dream had already come true in terms
Uh-huh.
of people getting along.
Right. So in Berkeley, I mean, were you a fan of any, what, I guess the 49ers or the Raiders or the Oakland
I
Raiders?
love the
Any,
Raiders.
Oakland
You know,
Raiders.
I was a big Raider fan, Um, and as the years went by, I became a 49er fan too. That really upset some people. You're not supposed
Yeah.
to love them both.
Well, I would assume you became a 49ers fan when they became more popular or more successful at some
Yeah,
point.
right. Exactly.
Okay.
Joe Montana and them started, rocking the place. So I said, okay, I think
Uh,
I'm gonna go along with all of them for a while.
what about basketball? I guess what
Oh my
Golden
goodness.
State
Well, Golden
Warriors.
State, absolutely. The Golden State Warriors were always my team. I tried to play basketball, in fact, in high school
Hmm.
for a while. I was just not tall enough to break loose. What can I say? uh, there was a lot of giants around. But anyway, I loved the Golden State Warriors, always did. Was a fan way back, Wilt Chamberlain and all those people forever.
So you had to kind of be happy when they won their first title back in '75, I believe.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, Steph Curry is still my favorite basketball player. I mean, I love LeBron,
Uh,
but Steph Curry is going to always be my favorite player.
right.
Plus, he's got a lot of class, you
Class,
know.
exactly. What was the music scene like? I mean, obviously you would become a very successful percussionist and a member of a very successful music band. But how did you got introduced into playing music or to getting involved in participating in the music scene?
Well, that was another beautiful thing about growing up in Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my father, first of all, was a tremendous music lover, and in my house there was music playing 24/7. And the variety of music that you could actually go out and see in the Bay Area was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would go out and see people like Nancy Wilson, and then Sly and the Family Stone, and and Frank Sinatra. And, everybody would come to or be in the Bay Area at some point because we had great venues for people to play at. And the music and the rock and roll music scene was off the hook. We had Jimi Hendrix hanging out around there,
Mm-hmm.
the Beatles, and on and on. So my experience in music is like it started back when my brother became a major success. He was in a duet called Joe and Eddie.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie, my brother, introduced me to every kind of music, Joan Baez, the Mamas and the Papas, and on and on. So my experience in music is like I don't have a favorite music. Music itself is my favorite soundtrack.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, Oliver, when did you first started playing the drums? I mean, you just started from scratch, or did you took any lessons towards learning how to play the drums?
Well, that I like that question
Mm-hmm.
because the truth of the matter is music comes from God.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have it, you will discover it. It's just as simple as that. I never uh, read music, not that I wouldn't have, but there wasn't much opportunity in that respect, especially for little black kids. They didn't want to encourage that too much in the schools. What can I say? However, um, I used to beat on the pots and pans around my house when I was a kid, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and drive my father and mother crazy with that. So I was, and bouncing in a chair. In fact, there were six of us in the family. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so my love of music was such that even when I was a child, I was like the entertainment for the other five. They would sit me on the couch and they would play different music. And as the tempo changed it, so did my rhythm in bouncing back and forth. And so music became me. And I've got this amazing, like I said, thank you, Father God, gift to be able to hear exactly what should go where in music, brand new music that I've never heard before. That's always been my gift. In fact, I just go in the studio and the producers never tell me what to play. They just say, put that. In fact, Steve Lamo was notorious for doing that. I would go into the studio and Steve would just put the music up and say, well, give me something on this. And I would just suggest what I think would go in verse segments, bridge, chorus, whatever, and then proceed to just play it. So the music, I play by ear,
Mm-hmm.
and even if you read, any great reader will tell you. Uh, in fact, Quincy Jones was notorious for this. He believed, and so do I, that it's hearing the music is more important than reading the music.
Mm-hmm.
Reading the music just makes a nice shortcut for everyone to get on the same page, as they say. But if you can't feel it and you can't hear it, then Quincy, in fact, he had the Johnson brothers for just that reason. They didn't read music either. I'm not suggesting that people don't read music. I'm just saying that if the talent is there, it's directly from God and we'll just be able to flow.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a tremendous story within itself, Oliver. Letting people know the history of how people can develop the natural instinct of being a musician, being part of a band. But was Casey and the Sunshine Band the first music group that you were part of, or were you part of a group before Casey and the Sunshine Band?
Well, actually, I had an amazing journey leading to Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Mm-hmm.
I was in the very first group I was ever in was a group called the Pasadena Ghetto Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this band never recorded a major record, and so people don't know about it. But the band had a bunch of musicians in it that were so talented that we put together a tape, sent two of our members to Europe because we had a little hassle with the racism situation down here in Los Angeles when they wanted to blackball the band because he wouldn't sign with one of the major power brokers, a fellow named Red Foster, who controlled the sound down here and managed a group called Three Dog Night with a few people. So they started pushing us out of the clubs. So we sent these people to Europe with nothing but a tape. And then we boldly booked ourselves on a flight without having a gig.
Mm-hmm.
And this was amazing. I can't believe we did this.
Right.
And they took the tape out to a place down in Sitges in Spain. And the owner of a club called the Trocadero got excited and said, um, can you bring these guys over? And the two members told him, well, they actually are booked on a flight and they should be here in a few days. So I went to Europe and played with this band all around the place. We were like the hot thing in Spain. And the band turned down a record deal with the company that had the Pop Tops on their label. They had that song called Mammy Blue or something like that. And because I was determined to quote unquote record and hang out with the stars,
Mm-hmm.
I left the band, ended up going to the Bahamas, started playing with everybody in the Bahamas, wanted to go check out the Miami sound.
Mm-hmm.
So we just crossed over into Miami and went out. This is very bold too. Uh, Took my drums and put them on a bus and went to this place. It was called Castaways, where all the musicians, the great musicians around Miami, were playing at that time. And ran into a drummer named Freddie Scott and rocked the house that night. So Freddie said, let me introduce you to Steve Alemo down at TK Records." And he was my in to TK Records. He walked up to Steve and said, "Look, you got to hear this guy." And thank you, Freddie.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve let me come in the studio, and once again he just put some music up and said, "Show me what you got." And I started recording on the stuff, and Steve said, "Look, this is what you do. Every morning you wake up, you call me, and I'll let you know what we have up here to do." And that was our arrangement. And Steve would just call me and say, "Well, we have three, we have four, come on down, whatever it may be." And it was, only like $25 a song, but back in those days, your rent was $100 a month or whatever it was. And so I would come in there every day and cut two or three or four songs with Steve with all the artists at TK because he was the vice president of the company and nothing got released from the label without Steve's approval.
Mm-hmm.
And so every record had to pass by him. And if he didn't like what he was hearing on it, he would add this or take away that or whatever. And so I became the quote unquote house percussionist for TK Records.
Right. And
That's how I ended up in the Sunshine Band.
yeah, and one thing you mentioned earlier about the Miami sound, and sometime I think the history of the Miami sound I think goes back a long way, but I think Betty Wright, who was very instrumental in, to some degree, influencing KC and the Sunshine Band and a few other groups during that time
Absolutely.
span. I don't know if she gets the credit that she really
Exactly.
deserves. But did
But
you? But
right.
yeah, but
Go ahead.
how was it like with you? I guess did you work with Betty Wright in any
Oh yeah.
capacity? You did. Okay.
Betty and I were very close and very tight, like I said, because I would hang out at the company every day,
Mm-hmm.
And the Sunshine Band were like you could compare Betty to Diana Ross
Mm.
with the Michael Jackson. I mean, and the Jackson Five thing. She was like their little mentor. I mean, she brought a lot of them into the company, introduced them to Steve and Henry Stone and all those people up there at TK. and she was like, the mother figure to that band. And so these youngsters would rely, and also they recorded on Betty's stuff.
Hmm.
You know, Jerome Smith was absolutely the baddest rhythm guitar player of all time down there,
Right.
and Betty had him in everybody's stuff, and so they would be and Robert Johnson, the drummer from the Sunshine Band. So although the Sunshine Band was it wasn't even a Sunshine Band at that time. In fact, they were a group called the Ocean Line,
Hmm.
and they worked down at Castaways like everybody else, around town that could play. And so Betty kind of nurtured that band into becoming a mainstay at TK Records. So Betty should get a lot more credit than she gets because she brought a bunch of people to that label.
Right.
There were a bunch of girl singers around there that Betty Wright introduced to the scene in Miami. She was an amazing force.
Hmm. Well, Oliver, when y'all was putting the tracks together for one of your first couple of albums, because as you mentioned earlier, and other people, Margaret Reynolds, who was also part of KC and the Sunshine Band, was a guest on All About You a months ago, also mentioned y'all had a lot of songs that y'all kind of put together already in the can. So when you were working with the songs that would be released, I guess a few years later, could you kind of get a sense that this was going to be a real unique hot style of music, or was it just something that you was learning and getting kind of used to? I mean, what was the whole take working on the first couple of albums that KC and the Sunshine Band had established?
Oh, well, Casey, that whole thing was really an amazing experience because the way it came together at the company. Like every company, there's kind of a pecking order.
Hmm.
The people that are making the hits, of course, they get all the prime time.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And so Benny Lattimore and Little Beaver and Betty Wright and on and on, Timmy Thomas, these people would come into the studio in the prime time hours and record. Well, Casey had a special relationship with Henry Stone. And it was almost like Henry Stone was like his godfather, so to speak. He took care of Casey. And although the first record they did didn't do so well in the States,
Hmm.
it managed to become number 5, I think, on the charts in England. Okay. So we were still way down in the pecking order at the company. So we had to come in there and record after hours at night when nobody was around. Now,
Hmm.
Rick Finch, of course, loved this because the bass player from KC and the Sunshine Band, because maybe we could just go up there and spend as much time as we want. And in many ways, it's why the band became so successful because we weren't under the pressure of the clock. So at night, everybody in the band, when we're not in the clubs working somewhere, would go up there and cut these records that were going to be the records that were going to bring the label to world acclaim.
Hmm.
And so, so that was the arrangement for Casey and the Sunshine Band, which made it possible to make something great happen. And in terms of my shall I say, contribution to this, it was nothing but sheer pleasure. Because, like I said, we had no boss, no one really instructing us how we had to do it. We could just go up there and experiment. So it worked to everybody's advantage, you
Hmm.
know. And Rick Finch, who was like a little genius with the board and mixing and mastering and that kind of stuff, you know, we would go up there sometimes and just Rick and I would just experiment with stuff until we had a sound that we thought was something hit. You know,
Hmm.
little did we know it was going to do what it did,
Right.
but it turned out to be the Sunshine Band, especially after Get Down the Night hit the streets and just took off like a jet plane.
I was
So
just gonna ask you that question. I mean, believe it or not, I was gonna ask you what did it feel like? I mean, what did it feel like when Get Down Tonight was released and it was just blowing up all over the country, if not all over the world? Because that was just a sound that a lot of people had gravitated to. And then when Casey and the Sunshine Band, y'all were hit the stage, and it's like almost a level of competition because from your style hitting the drums, and then you get the hornet or the trumpet players Then you get KC bouncing up and down on a piano, and then you get the background singers. It seemed like everything was just flowing. So, what was it like putting that song together in particular?
Well, it was just like some kind of a Cinderella story. I mean, really, or something out of a movie.
Mm.
If I had lived it, it would be hard to believe, but it happened exactly this way. Like I said, I was beholden to Steve Alemo, the vice president, who was keeping me working with everybody at the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he went to me, he said, "Look, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to go and play with these kids." Now, we didn't have a solid band, like I said. It was just the Ocean Liners, me, Rick, and KC. And we would go up there and just make this stuff because Henry Stone, the president of the company, was allowing it to happen at night, as I said. And so we up there working, making this project and having a great time with it. And we discovered that Queen of Clubs from the old record that didn't succeed in the States went #5 in England. So Steve said, "I want you to go on this tour and go over here to England with me with these kids, do this thing." So now we're forming a thing called what is going to be the Casey and the Sunshine Band.
Mm.
And so we're over there in England working like slaves, doing 2 shows a day sometimes, or literally run out the back door of one club and go across town to the next one where they had the stage set up and we would just proceed right just like doing a second set or something.
Mm.
And so we come home, dog tired, burned out, and we walk into the airport. And there's people all over the place running. I looked at Steve and I said, "Steve, somebody important must be here." Steve said, "No, this is for you guys. You have the #1 record in the country."
Mm.
That's how we found out that we had the #1 record. Now they had told KC, but he wasn't telling the band under Henry's instruction.
Right.
Wait till they come home, but let's just sit down and deal with this. Because no one expected that record to do what it did. Henry may have,
Mm.
but because he just listened to it while Steve and I and the rest of us were out there in England, and he said, "No, I'm putting this out." And he put it out, put the pressure behind it, and presto, the record blew up.
Right.
So here we go with press all over the place, limos waiting for us outside, and drive us off to the beach where fans are waiting everywhere, and put on another show, and the rest was history.
Mm-hmm. Now, excuse me, when you're going on stage, do you have to take it up another level? Because if you just watch some of the videos of y'all performance, it's like it's a lot of energy that it takes to put together that type of stage presence. I know as a percussionist, maybe your role might be a little bit different. I don't know if it's more harder, more easier, but what was it like when you have to hit the stage going from tour to tour to know you have to put that type of energy out there for people to really appreciate and enjoy your concerts?
Well, that was really my dream come true.
Mm-hmm.
From my first band, all I wanted to do was do what I saw Sly and the Family Stone do, which put on what I consider to be the greatest concert I ever went to.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am living the dream. I would go every time I go on stage, I feel like paying the people. Don't tell them, but it's
Right.
it's that much fun.
Right.
I'm just up there having a literal ball. And in the Sunshine Band, I was allowed a great deal of freedom. But that whole concept was coming from Ronnie Smith, Jerome's brother. Now, these two guys, I mean, the rhythm guitar player, Jerome, and Ronnie, who was the leader of the horn section, the trumpet player,
Mm-hmm.
they created that entire thing that people are seeing. And they don't get enough credit either.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were big fans as kids, to James Brown and all that stuff that was coming up in those days too. But Ronnie came with all that moving back and forth with the horns and stuff, and
Mm.
Denville Liptrop on sax, and he had Weaver, the second trumpet player, and they created a literal thing that nobody had. And then Robert Johnson, the drummer, that lick that you keep hearing almost on every record is
Mm-hmm.
he invented this thing. I tell people he invented the disco beat.
Right.
That was his style of play. that was natural to Robert as breathing. He
Mm-hmm.
had to force himself to do other stuff like other drummers because that was his thing, you know. And you knew Robert when you heard him, he had a foot that would not quit. But when the band, which was actually the Ocean Liners, with nothing but Rick and Casey and myself added to it, broke out there and became this thing, it was because they were already practicing all of that as the Ocean Liners, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So the credit belongs to Ronnie Smith, who came up with all those moves and all that stuff way back before we actually. Because I used to go down and have fun with them down on the beach, like I said, at the Castaways, and they were doing the same stuff then, you know.
Well, I tell you, the moves were very impressive. I mean, that Soul Train performance and other performances that Casey and the Sunshine Band had participated on was just excellent. And I know you would leave the group in 1975,
Right.
but and then I forgot to actually mention this during the introduction. Casey and the Sunshine Band have I guess you were your members or you're on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, which is a real high honor. Did Casey and the Sunshine Band win a Grammy? I believe you did win a couple of Grammys, at least the
Oh yeah,
band did.
we won a Grammy and we won several American music awards. In fact, it was an interesting story on that
Mm-hmm.
because I actually they still have my American Music Award, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the Academy over there.
Mm-hmm.
They should give it to me. You could tell them about it. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
what happened was uh, it was the best and the worst thing that ever happened in my career. You know,
Mm-hmm.
KC, uh, when we were, like I say, struggling upstairs and kind of the low folks down on the totem pole at TK, unfortunately made and I take every man at his word. He made a promise to the band. He said these exact words stuff during one of the rehearsal sessions up there. And he said, "Look, fellas, I know we up here with because there was no budget,
Mm-hmm.
not like Betty and the rest of the people were getting at TK. We just the kids up there trying to put something together, okay?"
Mm-hmm.
And Casey said, "Well, I know that we're, like I say, low on the totem pole, and we are up here doing this creative thing, but if anything ever comes from this, these words," he said, it's
Mm-hmm.
all words. If anything ever comes from this, it's going to be in for a penny and in for a pound.
Okay.
That meant we were going to share any success that might happen, you
Mm-hmm.
know which was kind of like a reason to continue to do it with the no budget and the rest and after hours and the so on. Okay. Well, little did we know that was going to turn into like about $7 million in a matter of about 6 months later. You know what I'm saying? And so this is now serious business.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Henry Stone and Steve Alaimo and them were some solid businessmen, and like every company, the smaller you have to make the pie, the better it is. The
Mm-hmm.
more slices you cut out of it, that's not good business. So of course, it came down to putting the band on salary. Now, to make that kind of palatable for me, because Casey knew what kind of man I was about this kind of stuff. And I said, "Casey, we promised. And he said, "Well, look, well, the band really is going to be just, Rick and you and Jerome and Robert and myself. And I said, "Well, what about the horn section? Especially since the horn section was literally had Ronnie in it, who was Jerome's out of the same room blood brother." I
Mm-hmm.
said, "So we're going to tell the horns that they're going on salary and the rest of us are going to cut this pie out."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was like, I wasn't too happy with this. What can I say? In fact, it was something I just stewed over. I couldn't find myself going along with this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually called the band together in my room while we were out on performing one of the concerts and said, "Fellas, you know the words floating around. This thing then got big and there's a lot of money on the table. And now they want to turn it into a situation where it's going to be, Rick and Casey, myself, uh, Ronnie here, and Robert Johnson, and they're gonna put the rest of the band on salary. And it was one of those things. Like I said, I really, in my gut, just couldn't go along with a deal like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, but if you guys want to do this, because I wanted to find some way to justify it in my own mind, it was like, well, if they don't want to fight it, then I'll just go along.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, I said, fellas, but frankly, I think we ought to stand up and tell these people that they're going to do what they said they were going to do in the beginning. And so the band agreed to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we all came home with a plan to not get in the limo when they called it up on the next date. And the band was officially on strike.
Mm-hmm.
So we went around and around for a while, and Henry Stone called the other members in, minus myself, and I remember Ronnie calling me and saying, "Hey man, the whole band's over here, and Henry's talking to me, blah blah blah." And I said, "Ronnie, stay there with your brother in there." But this was the beginning of the greatest thing that ever happened in my career,
Mm-hmm.
because right then I moved to LA and hooked up with Leo Sayer and Holland Dozier and Holland out of Motown and a bunch of other very important people, because my face was on the cover of Cashbox magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And so, unlike other people that come to Hollywood, I started right at the head of the class and started working with the A-list players.
Right.
And had that not happened, I would have been right there with the band being financially treated unfairly, and that would have been my story. Which that happened to the rest of them, sadly. I hate to say that, but that's the facts, and that's also why Casey and I don't have a problem, because it wasn't something he necessarily did. It was my choice. It was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, you can stay here and go along with this, Oliver, and we'll
Mm-hmm.
cut you in,
Mm-hmm.
or you know you can move on to higher ground.
Yeah.
Thank you, Father. The higher ground has been fantastic.
Well, speaking, I mean, it's almost like you became a solo artist now. You made the
Exactly.
transition from a group to a solo artist. But
Exactly.
when you look at some of the percussionists, let's just say even before you got really popular and established, like Ringo Starr, I don't know if people look at the drums as an easy or just simple type of instrument to play. But the people that came along a little bit after you, particularly let's say Sheila E., as the
I love
female,
it.
labeled one of the best percussionists in music history, or right up there.
I think
You
she's
look
the
at
greatest
Bert.
woman to come.
Uh
Myself. Well, Sheila and I knew Sheila when I was a kid and she was a kid. Um, I was working in the record shop, but Sheila,
huh.
uh, with a friend of ours, there was a drummer named Ricardo Lewis
Mm-hmm.
in the Bay Area, and he had a record shop that I would work at. But Sheila was already in the studio recording.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm sitting behind the counter practicing on my bongos and my congas, and
Right.
Sheila is going around the Bay Area blowing people's minds as this prodigy kid, from Tito Puente and all those badass players' family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew Sheila back in the day, so to speak, and we lost touch for a good little while.
Mm-hmm.
But I got into a band with Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac. I played with them too.
You did.
And Mick and I had a band called the Mick Fleetwood Blue Whale Blues Band. Well, he knew I thought Sheila was the cat's meow. So we were doing a show with Cheryl Crow coming up, and he got Sheila to come and play the timbales while I was playing the congas, and it was an amazing experience. So Sheila and I worked together, a couple of 3 times there, and it was fantastic. I think she's just, in fact, my two favorite percussionists in the world are Sheila E. and Bobby Hall.
Mm-hmm.
These girls are undeniable. Bobby Hall to me is the greatest recording percussionist I ever heard. Her style was amazing, and she knows I used to sit down and study it and cop all her licks, you know.
Yeah.
And Sheila was just somebody that had an energy and a fire on stage that just inspired me, from early on. So we've been going back a ways, but she's fantastic.
And Oliver, I think a lot of artists has to actually be inspired by KC and the Sunshine Band as a group as a whole because of just the way that y'all was able to put together, as I mentioned earlier, such a interesting, appealing stage presence. And when you're talking about artists that came along, I mean, you were in Los Angeles, a very competitive entertainment market, and it seems like a lot of people got to be at the A-list level to really be able to say that they can stand out and be established. So, as you are now branched out as a solo artist, are you just a percussionist, or are you doing any other things beyond just that part of the
Oh, yes,
musician?
indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right now I'm working with Niels, the smooth jazz artist. We
Mm-hmm.
have a record out called "Feeling Good," and "Feeling Good's" got this remake of an Earth, Wind and Fire song on it, "The Way of the World," and it's up now around I don't know three or something on the chart, but the record's doing fantastic. In fact, they're submitting it for a Grammy, and I hope we are selected and win it. But also, I'm heavily involved in a project with this amazing you people out there. Listen for this girl. I'm telling you, she's a monster. A young lady named Eileen Arden. And Eileen, I love her so much because she has a vocal style like no other rock and roll person I've ever heard. I mean, it's like, rock and roll artists all have a kind of a special sound to whatever they do. Well, in her case, her whole gift is having this big sound. I mean, her voice just it's overpowering, and you just can feel it in your bones when this girl sings. And it's a beautiful voice,
Mm-hmm.
and she ain't bad looking either. But
Right.
you have to hear Eileen, you know. And Niels produced her. I brought her to Niels because kind of like Quincy Jones, not to in any way compare myself to him, but what you do is as you have had a few successes in this business, you start looking around for who you can bring in, how you can inspire someone else that you know has what it takes to do this thing out here and entertain people. And Eileen is just full of it from head to toe. So keep your ears and eyes open, people. There's something coming from Nils, you know, called Eileen Arden, and she'll be recording with us, hopefully, for the next several years. Uh, and then I have a group that I formed with two other very talented friends of mine um, that have been in the business for a good little while. Uh, the group is called Gravity 180. And it's a unique group because it was a group that was formed, this trio was formed uh, not on, shall I say, deliberately. What happened was a way back when there was an ordinance in a club where we were playing that would not allow drums because they thought it would be too loud and the neighbors and so on and so forth. So this band was formed with no bass and no drums. It's just keyboards, acoustic guitar, two fabulous voices, Claudine and Harold, and myself on percussion. And over the years, we had a hit with Pony Cat Canyon Records over in Japan. And we are currently in the studio right now, working with Niels, who's producing the project,
Mm-hmm.
uh, putting together the next Gravity project. So be keeping your ears and eyes open for that too. I was listening to some of the mixes. We're doing one cut um, from a remake from Stevie Wonder, but it's never been done before because everyone knows Stevie is a solo artist. Well, this is a duet vocal sound, and we're doing a remake of Overjoyed, which I think you're going to love the way we present it.
So Oliver, you are continuing as a percussionist. You're not participating in any other particular instrument. I mean, I didn't really get a chance to even ask you that. So, as a percussionist, is that your main instrument that you've always
Right.
did as an artist that you
Oh,
played
yeah,
on?
absolutely. Well, percussion is a kind of a special kind of a contribution to music,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more than a note. In fact, when we go into record the percussion on a project, they call it the sweetening session. And the reason they call it that is because it isn't just a particular instrument.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going in and being a guitar player or being a horn player or whatever it is. You come in and you have to create the sounds that affect what the lyrics are saying and describe what is happening on the record. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a special kind of contribution to the music to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, when someone is singing a lyric and they'll say something like in the dreams or whatever. Well, you have to create something in the back of that that makes people see this, feel this, or whatever. And that's totally different from being, a sax player or being a guitar player or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's hundreds of instruments that you have to choose from. There are 10,000 different varieties of shakers, and there's tambourines, and there's bells, and conga, and wind chimes, and so on and so forth,
Mm-hmm.
and rain trees, this beautiful thing that you pick up and slide back and forth. And so you go into a session and you just kind of hear what's there. And then the gift is to be able to give something to the music that makes it come alive.
Mm-hmm.
I compare it to it's a black and white beautiful photo, and then percussion comes along and creates the color, and it jumps off the record at you. So it's a special kind of, shall I say, contribution to music, and the people that do it best basically are doing just that.
Mm-hmm. Well, Oliver, I always try to find a good way. Hopefully, my guest and the guest always plays a key role in this. A great subject matter, a great ending statement, and you almost kind of gave one of the great ending statements, just defining, a percussionist and what it consists of, and how it's a unique type of instrument comparable to the other instruments. As we're running just about out of time, I always ask the guests towards the end of the show if there's any last words or any last things about themselves or what you're currently doing or planning to do. Feel free to do so.
Okay. Well, what I'd like to say to everybody out there is that this is a world that needs music to direct the kindness and the love that God would have for the human race. So, all you people out there aspiring to make music as artists and contribute this, just make sure you stay positive. This music is supposed to edify the audience. You're supposed to feel much better going out than you felt coming in. So let us not disappoint God by taking his great gift to all mankind and putting it on any page that isn't possible.
Mm-hmm. Great words, man, to leave the ending of this particular show here. And it was really interesting and fun listening to you, learning something about, your life. Obviously, this is the whole purpose of All About You as a biographical show, to have the guests give their life story. And I think you gave a good, interesting part of your life story on the entertainment side. And I really appreciate you being available to be a guest. And I really loved your music as a child growing up. Aging myself, to be honest, but as a kid back in the 70s, man, you go to anybody that I knew and you put on the KC and the Sunshine Band song, and we just instantly started dancing and really getting down. So y'all had a long lasting impact and influence for people in that era in particular that grew up. And I really appreciate you being not only being on this show, but also the gift that God has given you as an artist. And you sound like you're a real down to earth person as well. So it's a really honor to be able to interview you this morning on the All About You talk show, Oliver C. Brown.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, this is Jonathan Small. Just enjoyed hosting and producing this edition of All About You this morning with a very special guest. He is one of the original members of the Hollywood Walk of Fame, multi-Grammy award-winning music group, KC and the Sunshine Band. I hope for you, the viewers, you was able to find this particular show entertaining and interesting. And as I say, I'm constantly working on a particular show. Don't have a show or a topic lined up next week. Working real hard to discuss this presidential election and outcome. So let me get back to work on that. But like I say to people out there every single week, have a very blessed day and keep the faith. Thank you.